I shouldn't be here. But here I am. The thought looped in my mind like a forbidden lullaby as I sat down on the edge of his bed, the coolness of his sheets brushing against the back of my thighs. The room smelled like him. Fresh cedarwood, clean linen, and something unmistakably male that made my pulse flutter in places I didn't want to acknowledge. The door clicked shut behind me, quieter than my conscience, but louder than it should have been. And just like that, the air was thick with something that wasn't quite guilt but wasn't innocence either. I had promised my husband I'd be home by 7. It was already 9:30. I had texted him earlier with a flimsy excuse about traffic and late meetings. But truthfully, I hadn't even looked at the time. I hadn't wanted to. Every glance at the clock was a reminder that I was stealing moments I had no right to. He, the man whose bed I was now sitting on, wasn't just a friend. He was that friend. The one who had always hovered a little too close, said things a little too boldly, made me laugh a little too hard when I should have been leaving the room. There had always been something electric between us, some invisible thread tugging just beneath the surface of every joke, every glance, every accidental brush of hands. Tonight the thread snapped. It started with a drink. Just one. Or at least that's what I told myself. We were celebrating the close of a project, some milestone that felt important enough to toast. The office was emptying out, lights dimming one by one. We stayed behind. He poured the wine. I didn't say no. We talked. We laughed. The wine turned into stories. The stories turned into something else entirely. When he leaned against the kitchen counter, watching me over the rim of his glass, I felt something shift. There was a silence between us that hummed like a prelude to something dangerous. I could feel it in the way my knees turned slightly toward him, the way I suddenly felt aware of my neckline, my perfume, the brush of my hair against my shoulder. "You want to see the new place?" he asked casually, too casually. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because I did. Too much. "Just for a minute," I lied. That was the first one. The smallest, most innocent betrayal. But lies are slippery things. They stretch like silk, then coil like rope. His apartment was close. A 5-minute walk, maybe less. We barely spoke on the way. My heart was pounding in my ears, but on the outside, I wore the mask of calm curiosity. As if I was still in control. As if I hadn't already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And now here I was. On his bed. In his room. The soft hum of a jazz record spinning in the background, low and smoky. A glass of something amber and warm in my hand. Him standing just a few feet away, watching me with eyes that didn't pretend anymore. "You okay?" he asked, voice husky soft. I nodded. Lied again. 'Cause I wasn't okay. I was trembling. Not from fear, but from the gravity of wanting. He took a slow step forward. Not touching. Not rushing. Just watching. "You can leave whenever you want," he said, but his voice told a different story. My lips parted. To speak? To breathe? I don't know. Nothing came out. Because in that moment I didn't want to leave. And that's when I knew. Something was about to happen that would change everything. His room was dim, bathed in amber light that seemed to cling to my skin like memory. The city murmured faintly outside, but inside it was just us. Suspended in that strange space between decision and regret. I didn't move. Neither did he. But the silence between us kept pulling, drawing us closer by degrees of breath and heartbeat. I stared down at the glass in my hands, watching the liquid ripple as my fingers trembled slightly. Not enough for him to notice, or maybe he did. His gaze was sharp like that, always catching things I tried to hide. The way my legs pressed a little tighter together. The way I bit the inside of my cheek when I was nervous. The way I couldn't quite look at him for more than a few seconds without something in my chest stuttering. He sat down beside me. Not close, not yet, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him. And then, without looking at me, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Just that. But the world tilted. I felt the warmth of his fingers graze my cheek, and my whole body reacted like he'd touched something buried deeper. Like his hand had found the switch to some part of me I'd kept dimmed for too long. My breath caught, small and involuntary, and I hated how much he must have heard it. He looked at me then. Slowly. Like he was trying to memorize my expression. "I shouldn't have done that," he said, but he didn't move away. "I shouldn't be here. I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. We were two liars orbiting the same confession. He leaned in just a little. Just enough. His arm brushed mine, barely there, but it was the kind of touch that made my skin burn with the absence of more. Then why are you? He asked. God. That question. Why was I? Why had I taken the long way home in my mind all week, building the fantasy of this moment with every unresolved glance we'd shared? Why had I worn perfume tonight, not just the everyday one but the one? Why had I come up here? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth sat too deep in my chest to reach. Or maybe I didn't want to touch it. Not yet. Instead I looked at him. Fully. And for the first time I didn't look away. His hand moved again, slower this time, brushing the side of my arm just barely. Fingertips skating over fabric, heat trailing behind. I inhaled sharply and he paused. You want me to stop? He asked, voice rough. No one had ever said my name the way he said it just then, like a promise and a dare. I don't know what I want, I breathed, though we both knew I was lying again. He leaned closer. His mouth hovered inches from mine, but he didn't kiss me. Instead, he let the tension build. Inch by slow, unbearable inch. I could feel his breath against my lips, the warmth of it, the hesitation, the ache. His eyes flicked down to my mouth, then back up. He was waiting, giving me a chance to choose. I didn't move, didn't kiss him, didn't stop him. And in that stillness, something between us shattered. Or maybe it was born. His hand slid behind my neck, gentle but sure, pulling me just enough that I had to close my eyes. Not from fear, but from surrender. The first touch wasn't a kiss. It was the space before it. The moment where the whole world holds its breath and waits to see what you'll become. And in that moment I wasn't a wife. I was just a woman who had stepped off the edge of her own restraint, and was still falling. He didn't kiss me. Not yet. Instead he lingered there, mouth so close I could feel the pull of it, the gravity, the warm whisper of his breath mixing with mine. And yet he didn't close the space. He waited, and the waiting was agony. Delicious, dangerous agony. My heart was hammering. Not just from the proximity but from the realization. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a slip. We had been inching toward this moment for months, maybe longer. Every glance, every laugh, every subtle pull away from the boundaries we were supposed to honor, they had all led here. And now the only sound between us was breath. His fingers slid from the back of my neck, tracing lightly down my spine, slow enough to be reverent, confident enough to make me shiver. My body leaned toward him without permission. It was instinct. It was betrayal blooming beneath my skin. Still we didn't speak. Words would have made it real. And we weren't ready for real. Not yet. I've thought about this, he finally said, his voice low, almost reluctant. Too many times. I swallowed. My mouth was dry but my skin felt fevered. So have I whispered. The truth tasted like confession. Warm. Bitter. Necessary. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. His eyes weren't teasing anymore. They were dark, serious. A storm rolling in. Tell me to stop, he said. Not because he wanted me to, but because we both knew I wouldn't. I didn't. I couldn't. And that was all he needed. His lips brushed mine. Not even a kiss. Just a feather-soft pass that stole the breath from my lungs. My eyes fluttered shut, my hands clutching the sheets on either side of me like I needed to anchor myself to something. Anything. And then finally his mouth found mine. But it wasn't desperate. It wasn't greedy. It was controlled. The kind of kiss that said, I've imagined this 100 times, and I'm going to savor every second now that it's real. He kissed like he was learning me, like he was unwrapping something he had no intention of rushing. His hand settled at my waist, thumb pressing gently into the curve of my hip. My own hands betrayed me, reaching up, threading into his hair, pulling him just enough closer to blur the line I had sworn not to cross. The heat between us rose in waves, swelling with every slow movement, every pause, every unspoken question that our bodies started answering without permission. When we finally pulled apart, I didn't open my eyes right away. I was afraid to, because I knew what I'd see. Not guilt, not shame, but need, desire, the truth of it all. And that scared me more than anything. You okay? He asked again, his voice softer this time, roughened with restraint. I nodded, unable to lie this time. But something inside me was already unraveling. Threads I couldn't gather back, no matter how hard I tried. Because now I knew, it wasn't the kiss that would ruin me. It was the way I had wanted it long before it ever happened. I stayed. That's the part one keep coming back to. I stayed even when I could have walked away, even when I told myself I would. I lingered in that dim-lit room where everything smelled like temptation and nothing sounded like reason. He didn't pressure me. He didn't even touch me again for a while. After that first kiss, everything slowed. He sat beside me, his fingers brushing mine now and then like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to want more, or if I would let him. That made it worse somehow. The restraint. The silence laced with desire. It burned hotter than anything else. "I thought you'd leave," he said after a long stretch of quiet. "So did I replied. We didn't look at each other when we said it. It was easier that way, like if we didn't meet eyes, maybe we could pretend we weren't two people willingly unraveling something we could never put back together." I stared at the framed photo on his dresser. An old snapshot of him and someone I didn't recognize. Smiling. Laughing. It felt like a version of him I'd never seen and never would. I wondered in that moment if he'd ever looked at her the way he looked at me now. "Do you ever want to forget your life for a night?" I asked, my voice a ghost of itself. He turned to me slowly. His answer wasn't words. He just nodded. That's when I stood. My hands trembling. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't. Because it felt too easy, too natural to let my moral compass slip into sleep. I walked toward the window. The city lights blinked back at me like they knew what I was about to do. Like they'd seen it all before. Behind me I heard him stand, the floor creaking beneath his weight. "You don't have to," he said gently. I turned, met his eyes and smiled, but not because I was happy. I already did. There's something devastating about realizing how far you'll go just to feel something that's been missing for too long. How one night, one gaze, one touch can make the rest of your life feel like a distant sound you're choosing not to hear. He stepped toward me. Closer. And I let him. Because right then I wasn't thinking about my husband. I wasn't thinking about the promise I made when I slipped on that ring. I was thinking about the way this man looked at me, like I was still electric. Like I still had parts worth discovering. Like I hadn't disappeared beneath years of compromise and routine. His hands found my waist, slow, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. His forehead pressed gently to mine, our noses brushing, and I could feel his hesitation. Feel his restraint unraveling with every second I didn't move away. "I want to remember this," he said. "You will," I whispered before pressing my lips to his again. Deeper this time, slower, with all the hunger I'd tucked away behind closed doors and polite smiles. It wasn't a fall. It was a surrender. And in that surrender, I told myself one final lie. This doesn't mean anything. But oh, it did. And it was only just beginning. There's a moment, just before everything changes, when the world holds still. A pause between two heartbeats. A breath before the unraveling. A whisper before the truth arrives. That was us. The room was wrapped in gold-shadowed quiet. The record had stopped spinning. The city outside had dimmed into a distant hush. And yet inside every sense was dialed up. Hypersensitive, sharp-edged. My skin felt alive, like it knew something I wasn't ready to admit. He kissed me again, but slower this time. Not hesitant. Certain. Like he wasn't asking anymore. Like I had already answered with every choice that led me here. His mouth moved over mine with maddening patience, as if he knew that once this door opened, there'd be no going back, and he wanted to savor every inch of the threshold. His hand slid over my hips, then paused, fingers resting at the edge of my blouse, not rushing, just waiting. The heat between us pulsed, electric and unspoken. "You sure?" he asked, voice rough with restraint. I looked at him. I really looked at him. And maybe I should have said no. Maybe I should have thought about tomorrow or next week, or what it would feel like to sit across from my husband with this memory curled beneath my skin like a secret flame. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I'd never felt more seen than I did in that moment. Not in years. So I nodded. A small, deliberate nod. The kind that says I know this is wrong and I want it anyway. He exhaled, something deep and primal, like he'd been holding his breath for far too long, and his hands finally moved. The way he touched me, it wasn't hurried. It was reverent, as if every brush of his fingers was a question, and my shivers were the answer. My back arched to meet him before I even knew I was moving. My breath hitched in quiet gasps as his hands explored every outline like he was tracing a path he dreamed of but never dared follow. There was no rush, no frenzy, just the unbearable slowness of two people finally letting go of all the things they'd held in for far too long. And yet, beneath the heat there was something else, something more dangerous. Emotion. It shimmered in the way he looked at me. It trembled in the way he whispered my name. It curled into my spine when he brushed his lips against my shoulder and just paused there, breathing me in. This wasn't just about want. It was about need. It was about being chosen, desired, known. And that scared me more than the infidelity, because it meant this wasn't just a night. This wasn't just a mistake. It was the beginning of something I wouldn't be able to forget. I opened my eyes just for a second and caught our reflection in the darkened window. Tangled shadows wrapped in each other, lit by city light and recklessness. And suddenly it hit me. I wasn't pretending anymore. And neither was he. The room felt different after. Not louder, not quieter either. Just charged. Like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone to name what had just happened. But neither of us did. We couldn't. He lay beside me, one arm flung carelessly behind his head, the other brushing mine with just enough contact to say I'm still here. I stared up at the ceiling, heart still rattling against my ribs like it hadn't made peace with what we'd done. I don't know how long we stayed like that, silent, tangled in sheets and shadows. My body hummed with aftershock, but my mind had already started to drift into dangerous territory. What now? That question echoed louder than anything else. He turned toward me slowly, his fingers brushing my shoulder. That small touch nearly broke me, because it wasn't seductive. It wasn't fueled by heat or impulse. It was tender, and tenderness somehow felt more intimate than everything that came before it. I don't want you to hate yourself in the morning, he murmured. I didn't answer, because he wasn't wrong. I already could feel the weight of the lie building again, pressing against my chest, winding its way around my spine. But I didn't regret it. Not yet. And that was worse. That was terrifying. Instead, I asked, why did we wait this long? He gave a soft, broken laugh. Because we were trying to be good people. Did it work? He looked at me. Really looked. And then said the most honest thing either of us had spoken all night. No. Something inside me splintered. I wanted to cry. Or scream. Or curl into him until I could forget the life I had before this room existed. Instead I stood. Slowly. Careful not to look in the mirror near the dresser. I couldn't. I knew what I'd see. Not just disheveled hair and swollen lips. Not just the ghost of something sacred and broken. I'd see the woman I'd become. The one I swore I'd never be. He sat up, watching me like he wasn't sure if he should reach for me or let me go. The tension between us had shifted. It wasn't lust anymore. It was something heavier. Something that lingered like perfume in the air after a door closes. You don't have to leave, he said gently. And God, a part of me wanted to stay. Just a little longer. One more minute in the heat of this bubble before the real world came crashing in. But I shook my head. If I don't leave now, I never will. He nodded. He understood. But I saw the flicker of pain in his eyes anyway. I dressed in silence, my fingers fumbling over buttons, my pulse thick and uneven. When I finally turned to him, he stood too, like he couldn't let me go without something more. He stepped forward, cupped my face in his hands, and kissed me once. Slowly, without hunger. A goodbye. And maybe a promise. I left without another word. The hallway was too quiet. The elevator too bright. The night too cold. And when I got into my car, hands shaking, heart fractured, I still couldn't look at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Because I knew. I was already planning how to see him again. The drive home felt like sleepwalking through someone else's life. Streetlights smeared across the windshield like guilt I couldn't wipe clean. Every red light felt like a question I didn't want to answer. Every familiar turn toward my neighborhood was a countdown. Not to peace, but to the performance I'd have to step back into. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my palms were damp against the steering wheel, and my pulse hadn't slowed once since I left him. My house looked the same, warm lights on in the hallway, the porch light glowing patiently, The door still painted the soft green my husband loved. But I was different. I sat there, unmoving, the engine ticking softly beneath the silence. I could still feel his hands on my waist. The weight of his body pressed to mine. The way he had whispered my name like it was something he'd never forget. And the worst part? I didn't want to forget. When I stepped through the front door, everything smelled like home. Lavender. Vanilla. A hint of laundry detergent still clinging to the throw blanket on the couch. But layered beneath all of it was him. His scent still clung to my clothes, to my skin. I stood there, frozen in the entryway, afraid to move. Afraid he'd be able to smell it too. Not the literal scent, but the change in me. The crack in my voice. The ache still pulsing low in my stomach. The way I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes. "Hey," my husband said from the kitchen. "Everything okay?" I nodded too quickly. Too rehearsed. "Yeah. Sorry I'm late. Things ran over." He smiled, not unkindly. "Long day?" "Yeah," I murmured. "Exhausting." He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me in, and I let him. I let my body fold into his because it was easier than pulling away. His embrace was familiar. Steady. The kind I used to find comfort in. But tonight it felt like a lie. Because as he held me, I was hyper-aware of the way his fingers didn't spark anything. The way his mouth on my temple didn't make me melt. The way I didn't have to fight to breathe or remember who I was. And that terrified me. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, finally looking. Finally seeing her. The woman I'd tried not to face in his apartment. Her lips were still a little swollen. Her eyes darker. Her hair tousled from hands that weren't supposed to touch her. And her perfume? It was still there. A mix of him and me and everything we weren't allowed to be. I should have washed it off. Scrubbed until it was gone. Until the scent of him no longer whispered secrets into the air around me. But I didn't. I just stood there, breathing it in, eyes locked on the mirror. A silent dare to admit the truth. I missed him already. The next morning didn't feel like morning at all. It felt like the aftermath of something unspoken. Like waking up in a version of your life that looks identical on the outside, but is warped on the inside. The air in our bedroom was still. My husband's soft breathing beside me was steady, peaceful. And I hated how it made my stomach twist. Because while he slept wrapped in trust, I lay there drowning in the weight of everything I couldn't say. I hadn't slept. I'd stared at the ceiling for hours, haunted by the heat of another body. The taste of a kiss that still lingered on my lips. I kept replaying the way he had looked at me in the dark. With hunger, yes, but also something gentler. Something dangerously close to care. That was the part one hadn't expected. It wasn't just lust that had undone me. It was being wanted in a way that saw me, heard me, touched not just my body but the parts of me that had long gone quiet in this marriage, the parts that once felt radiant and now felt invisible. I got up quietly, careful not to wake him, and stepped into the shower. I turned the water as hot as I could stand it, letting the steam blur the mirror and scald the memories off my skin. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, I couldn't erase him. The way his hand had cradled the back of my neck, like he was holding something breakable. The way I had whispered things I didn't know I needed to say. The way I hadn't just wanted it, I had needed it. When I finally stepped out, I caught my reflection. Same face, same skin, but different eyes. Eyes that had crossed a line. And the truth is, I didn't want to go back. Not really. The guilt was real. Heavy. But beneath it, something else bloomed. A kind of dangerous aliveness. I had felt more awake in his arms than I had in years. That day passed like molasses. I moved through the motions, breakfast, errands, emails, but my mind was elsewhere. I checked my phone obsessively, even though I knew I shouldn't. And when his name finally lit up my screen with a single message, "I can't stop thinking about you," I stared at it for 5 full minutes before I let myself smile. Because neither could I. I should have deleted it. Should have ignored it. Should have shut the door before it opened again. But I didn't. Because that night didn't end when I left his bed. It started something. And now, every time I kissed my husband, every time I smiled at dinner, every time I laughed at a joke we'd both heard 100 times, I felt it. The difference. The echo of something I didn't want to forget. The part of me that had awakened and refused to go quiet again.